An Amber Alert for a missing pregnant teenager out of Beaver Dam has expanded to 3 states now. 16-year-old Sophia Franklin was last seen nearly 2 weeks ago.
She is said to be traveling with the father of her unborn child, 40-year-old Gary Day of Arkansas. The 3 states include Wisconsin, Arkansas, and now parts of Missouri. In a First Alert update, Samantha Cavalli shares what she's learned from an Amber Alert expert about the criteria it takes for one to be activated.
Right, Cami and Bill, there are multiple recommended guidelines when it comes to before activating that Amber Alert that can be activated, and those requirements, they differ from state to state. When it comes to the generalization of those Amber Alert activation guidelines, it includes: is the child under 17 years old? Is the child in imminent danger or grave bodily harm? Is there enough descriptive information about the child, the suspect, and or the vehicle they are traveling in? Today I interviewed Jennifer Price Lehman, Deputy Administrator of Amber Alert Training at the National Criminal Justice Training Center of Fox Valley Technical College. She says the guidelines in, say, Wisconsin, for example, for a statewide Amber Alert may not be the same in surrounding states like Illinois or Minnesota. If Wisconsin is requesting the activation of an Amber Alert in another state, it does not guarantee that that other state will issue the alert. Price Lehman says it all comes down to timing. The essence of the Amber Alert is to leverage the public in helping to find a missing child.
So every single person out there who gets that alert is responsible for calling law enforcement if they see something, even if it turns out to be the wrong vehicle, the wrong person, the wrong child. What would you think if it was the right one and you didn't call?
So Price Lehman says that safety is of top priority because when a child goes missing, a crime has been committed. Law enforcement say if you do see Gary or Sophia, to not approach and to call law enforcement immediately. Coming up later tonight at 6, we're going to discuss how distance plays a role into how people in other parts of the state receive Amber Alerts. Reporting in the Fox Valley Newsroom, Samantha Cavalli, Action 2 News.